Hey, folks, we are recording, what episode is this? 148
It is.
of the Calibrate Life Podcast. And we are once again recording the video as we record the podcast live. So there we go. And here we go. Are you ready?
I think I am.
All right. Hey, those we lead have the opportunity to see who we really are when we lead them in and through crisis. You see, our heart, our character, our resolve, our faith, our love, and our motivations are all revealed. And in this episode of Calibrate Life, we discuss 8 things for a leader to keep in focus while leading during a crisis.
Hello and welcome everyone to episode 148 of the Calibrate Life Podcast. I'm Donna.
And I'm David.
This podcast, well, it's about calibrating our lives because as spiritual leaders, we experience transformation before we can lead transformation.
And it's about pressing beyond the tough stuff to experience the joy of living, leading, and loving.
And it's about the great adventure because life is an adventure to be joyfully lived.
And we are on this journey, and it's out of this journey that we speak. And that is what this podcast is about.
Yes, and today we are going to be talking about leading in crisis and giving some actions, some tips that a leader can take during crisis.
Yeah, we've got about 8 pointers. And I pulled some of this from a resource that I wrote several years ago that was somewhat responding to the 9/11 crisis, but it was several years after that, a few years after that at least. And I thought this was good stuff for where we are in this time of the COVID-19 crisis, that we're leading kind of in paths that we've not walked before. And while every crisis has its own unique things about it and leadership challenges, this pandemic, as they call it, as it's becoming known, presents some challenges. So that being the case, I thought that we would just talk about crisis leadership a little bit, or at least one facet of it, some things to keep in mind when we are leading in a crisis.
Yeah, and you've got a lot of great tips as well.
Well, thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, leadership is defined in a crisis. In fact, a moment like this moment in time where it's a challenge. And, you know, the funny thing about it is I've been thinking, life doesn't seem all that odd or unusual right now. I guess when you're in the middle of something, it feels differently than anticipating it. I think what I mean by that is if someone was telling us, okay, this is going to happen in the year 2020, if it came, we'd be thinking, wow, that's just, I don't want to live through that.
Yeah.
But actually being in the middle of it, it is a challenge, but it feels differently than it would in anticipation, if that makes sense.
I think it does make sense.
Yeah. And so as leaders and as spiritual leaders, it's moments like this really that all of our preparation is for.
Yeah.
That's when we really need leaders, is when we're in a crisis, that our leadership is defined just in that crucible. And it really reveals who we are.
Okay.
And it sets the stage for leadership. And these are important times to lead in.
You made the statement that leadership is defined in crisis.
Yeah.
So what do you mean?
Well, it's how we react to the tough times that's going to determine whether people will follow us in catastrophic times.
Yeah.
You know, there's a message I used to preach years ago about David facing Goliath, and the fact that crisis in the nation's history, as well as the challenge that David faced, that it was necessary for his positioning as a leader, that because the people saw how David responded when he faced Goliath, they saw how he responded when he stood against the Philistines, against the enemies, that he responded as a leader, he responded as a champion, and that positioned him in the hearts of the people to lead.
Yeah.
So we've got to have those moments where our leadership is defined and we're able to step up and do what God's called us to do.
You know what I was thinking? David's fighting the Goliath. Everybody's watching. They're paying attention to how he is handling that situation. And is that not true with leaderships in times of crisis? People are paying attention.
Yeah, and I think that the reality is that when we are in the times of crisis, that people are watching, and they may not be thinking about it a lot when we are responding well, but when we panic or when we respond inappropriately,
Yeah.
those are the things that people really notice.
Yeah. I want to follow a leader who doesn't fall apart,
Yeah.
who handles crisis well.
Yeah.
So you've got several tips
Yes.
on how to respond. 8 of them, yeah.
Yes. 8 of them to be exact.
Okay. All
so
right.
the first is that leading in a crisis. And by the way, I want to say that, yeah, we all know that we're in the middle of a pandemic, and I know that a lot of the content that's being put out is about that, and it's about leading in that. But this is some stuff that really we need to live with as leaders. It's not just during a pandemic or during a crisis that we need to keep these things in mind. It's during the crisis when these things are revealed. And so that being the case, that these are just some simple leadership pointers, if you would, or principles, maybe is a better way to put it. But the first thing is never lose sight of the main thing. The main thing.
Okay, so often it's so easy to focus on the crisis, David.
Yeah, crisis leadership is the ability to influence others. It's the ability to stay focused on the mission while simultaneously managing an event that's threatening the health or the existence of the organization.
Okay, you're not saying that we don't respond, though. I mean, when there is a crisis, I mean, obviously in the middle of a very difficult situation, we have to respond.
Yeah, we do. We can't act as though nothing odd is happening.
That's what I mean.
But one mistake that a leader might make in a crisis is to divert all of the effort, all of the energy to crisis management, and all of the other things that are important to the mission of the church. Those things are forgotten. And that is part of leadership, is being able to balance that out, being able to look at it and know how much attention to give to the crisis, but how much energy needs to still go into maintaining the main thing.
Okay. All right. Okay.
Yeah. So we have to make it as black and white as we can, that peripheral concerns are going to swirl about. And one thing that I learned a long time ago as it relates to leadership is when there is something unsettling happening, or there is a crisis, and particularly when it's a financial crisis, odd things start to happen in a church and in an organization when the finances are really majorly stressed. It causes people to begin to question decisions more, causes them to question the vision more, and it can cause a general unrest. And one thing we haven't talked about a lot with this current crisis is, for businesses and for churches, there is going to be financial pressure.
Yeah, of course.
And when the financial pressure comes, that tends to become the focus. And I've just been amazed through the years to see people respond, that they'll begin to come after things like they don't like your haircut, or they don't like the pattern of your tie, or something like that. And as a leader, we've always got to be able to look through what's on the surface and to get down into what's really going on here. And that's a huge leadership principle.
Yeah.
So we've got to keep moving back to the main thing, pulling people back to what's important, keep reminding them and encouraging them back to the basic fundamental elements. And actually, as I've watched leaders responding mostly on social media, and the thing that's kind of different about this crisis than many others that have been faced before is we're not all together.
Yeah.
We're not in a meeting room. We're not having a business meeting. We don't have a forum where everybody's together and they start to talk and things start becoming bigger. So this one is a little bit different than what can typically happen. But of course, that can happen through social media and everything. But as I've watched leaders, pastors, spiritual leaders on social media, I believe that for the most part, I've seen them doing a great job with this, of pulling people back into this is the main thing and this is what we've got to focus on during this time.
Yeah. Okay. Good.
Yeah.
All right. Number 2.
Number two, as I start to loosen up a little bit, this live broadcast thing, which, by the way, this is going to live on YouTube. We have a YouTube channel at youtube.com/Calibrate360. I think we have 2 subscribers. So if
you and me, right?
Did you subscribe?
No, not yet.
Okay. I don't know who the second one is. It's surely.
I guess I should subscribe to our own channel, shouldn't I?
It's surely not any of our kids. I
don't think so.
I could be really certain about that. But yeah, as we video the recording of these podcasts, some people would rather watch than listen. I don't know. I would rather listen, but they're going to live in YouTube at youtube.com/Calibrate360.com. Anyway.
Okay.
How did I get into that?
I have no idea, but we're on the second tip to keep in mind.
I think I was talking about the fact that when it's running live, because see, folks, here's the deal. We start and stop several times. I mean, we'll
usually we do, yes.
We'll get like 5 minutes into the thing, and I'll say, this just is getting into that pace, getting into the rhythm, and so we kind of have to jump start with it live. So the jury is still out. We're still evaluating whether or not we want to continue to do this here in our basement studio.
Yeah.
But anyway, as I'm starting to loosen up, number 2.
Okay.
We've got to set an example with meaningful and symbolic actions.
Okay.
Yeah.
Meaningful and symbolic actions.
Yes.
All right.
Yeah. Back in 1914, Sir Ernest Shackleton, in a story that just has always fascinated me, but as they were trying to be the first, Ernest Shackleton and his team trying to be the first to accomplish a land crossing of Antarctica.
Okay.
And so as they were preparing for this, their ship was damaged by ice floes, and before they reached the base camp, the ship sank. So they're in this major crisis, and so this 18-month, a year and a half ordeal kicks in.
Oh, man.
Where a big focus of theirs is survival.
Yeah.
And one of the things that they had to do is they had to get rid of most everything that they had. They had to get down to the bare essentials, no frills, no luxuries. They just had to get down to the basics or they weren't going to survive. There was no way that they could carry all of their equipment and everything they had. And here's the thing that has just always inspired me is that Sir Ernest Shackleton, as he is telling the men in the expedition, we've got to get rid of everything we don't need. He takes his gold pocket watch, which is very important to him, and a gold cigarette case, as it was, and he throws them away. Now,
because it had so much weight.
Yeah. In the scope of this expedition, how much weight and how much difficulty is it to carry a gold pocket watch?
Well, seriously,
in your pocket?
How much difference did that really make?
Yeah, it probably did not affect the mission that much, but symbolically and to set the pace and to set the example, it was huge.
Yeah.
Because he was making a statement to all of the men in that party and that expedition. So as transformational servant leaders, we have got to be the first to serve. We've got to be the first to set the example. We've got to be the first to volunteer. We need to be the first to sacrifice. And as we do that, we teach by our actions and we inspire those that we lead to greatness through our own selfless acts.
Yeah.
As a leader, that is just absolutely huge. And when we are in a time of crisis leadership, people are watching when we're calling upon them, when we're encouraging them to make sacrifices. They're watching whether or not we make sacrifices.
So if we are asking them to be faithful in giving or whatever the case may be, we need to do the same.
Yeah, yeah. And to bring this down into, we could call this the Africa update. We could start the music. But, there have been churches that have made gestures that I'm going to say are somewhat symbolic to us. A small offering, when the budget is so large, a small one-time offering doesn't make a huge dent in and of itself. Of course, if everybody was doing that,
Sure.
it would make a huge dent. But sometimes I think, okay, and I'm just going to put it in the scope of missions because we are in missions.
That's where we live, yeah.
And so many of our supporters, in fact, to what I'm able to see, all of our partners have been phenomenal.
Yeah.
And I don't know what challenges that we face in the future, but there have been some that have encouraged their church to give, be it maybe a smaller amount or whatever, because they were intent on making a statement that missions is important. This is important to us, and we are going to do this. And that makes a statement to a congregation. It makes a statement to the people that you're leading.
Yeah.
And they
That's a meaningful action.
Yes, it's somewhat symbolic in a way. Loosely, it is symbolic, extremely meaningful.
Yeah.
And it's an object lesson that teaches. So
Yeah.
what do we have here so far? Never lose sight of the main thing. Number 2, set an example with meaningful and symbolic actions.
And number 3.
Affirm your commitment to see the crisis through.
Oh, yes, please.
Yeah.
Don't quit.
Spiritual leaders are shepherds, not hirelings. And I think that this applies not only to those who pastor a church, and we think of them as shepherds, but as a transformational servant leader, whether that's in the marketplace or in a nonprofit, in the church world, in an organization, as a transformational servant leader. We need to do a series on what a transformational servant leader is and what that looks like, and really dig deep into that. But a transformational servant leader will lead as a shepherd rather than a hireling. And for those who may not be familiar with the term hireling, that's what you called someone who looked like a shepherd, but the sheep weren't theirs. They were just being paid to watch them. And when the wolf comes, the hireling runs away. When the wolf comes, the shepherd will stand and fight the wolf.
Yeah.
And I have always been really hesitant to just say to the people that I lead, hey, I'm here forever. I'm not leaving. I'm never going anywhere. I don't control the will of God for my life. But in a crisis, I think we've got to drive the stake in the ground and say, I'm with you. I'm not going anywhere.
Yeah.
Whether this organization, this church, whether it can pay me anything or not. Now it's getting deep. Whether, and particularly in a church, but also a leader in any arena during a crisis, that I'm going to see this through with you. I'm not going anywhere,
Right.
Whether this organization, this church can pay me or not. And I've seen that heart of a shepherd demonstrated many, many times. And it's always inspiring to me to just drive that stake in the ground during those times, and that expands out that with spiritual leadership. My pastor, his name was Billy Cotton, and he was my pastor when I was a teenager. And he said something to me. There's just a few things that I really remember him saying, but one of the things he said to me was, never leave when things are not going well. Leave when they're going well, if you're going to leave. And I have thought about that, because when you're in the middle of a crisis, that's not the time to run. It's not the time to leave.
Yeah. Okay. So see the crisis through.
Yeah.
Okay. Number 4.
Instill optimism and confidence.
Yeah. I want a confident leader, not somebody who's not sure.
Right. This one's a little hard for me to speak about, because there are folks that might think that I'm talking about them, but I don't have anybody particular in mind as I say this. But I observe spiritual leaders. I watch what they're doing. I observe the fruit of their efforts. And I have noticed that those who have proven leadership and there is fruit, there's result that have come forth that's been birthed forth from their leadership. I have noticed that in times like this, they don't surface conspiracy theories. Right now, there's a crisis to be gotten through, and they're focusing on inspiring optimism and confidence in their people.
Yeah.
Wow, that was a little bit hard for me to say.
Yeah.
Pay attention. Pay attention to leaders who inspire. There's a time to circle back and say, okay, now we got to talk about this because I'm not so sure that this was done right. I'm not so sure that was done right. And we need to talk about it. And there needs to be some accountability.
Yeah.
But in the middle of the storm, and okay, if we envision that we're on a ship and as the leader standing on the helm with your team and you're hanging on to the wheel of that ship, and wind is blowing in your face and rain is blowing in your face and there's thunder and lightning and the boat's going up and it's crashing down, that's not the time to stand on the helm and say, you know what, the guys that made this boat,
we think it's their fault.
What you got to be doing is, guys, we're going to do this. We're going to make it. And to every spiritual leader out there, we know we've been in those places. I've been there where I've said, inside me, I'm thinking, we're not going to make it. It's just, we're not. I'm kind of a negative person anyway, right?
It can happen sometimes.
I'm very pragmatic and very realistic. And so I can be looking at things and on the inside.
But you're not saying that we just lie about it. Is that what you're saying? I mean, okay, maybe you're feeling, okay, so what are you saying
then? No,
I'm
not. But like there's times when on the inside I'm thinking we're toast. But on the outside, I'm saying, folks, we're going to make it. We're going to make it. The sun's going to rise again. And am I lying? No, I believe that. It's just that on the inside, I'm battling my own fears, but I know in whom I have believed. And I am persuaded that he is able to keep that which I've committed unto him against that day. I trust God. And so in spite of my fears, I'm going to speak that I trust God, that I believe him to see us through. In the grief process, I wanted to quit. I wanted to dig a hole, crawl in it, and pull it in on top of me and just be done in losing a spouse. And you've experienced that as well. But to stand and to say, I believe that God is going to see me through. That's one of the things that got me through. There's those three choices, those three decisions that I made early in the process, and I won't go into all of them, but one of them was that I'm going to do whatever it takes to be whole. Actually, I'm going to go through. The next one was I choose to believe that good things are going to happen that would not have happened had this not happened first. And the third choice was when I am whole, I'm going to help somebody else walk this path.
Yeah.
And what I was saying to myself, especially in the second, that I believe that good things are going to happen that could not have happened had this not happened first. What I'm saying is I trust God to redeem this situation. As much as I don't even want to face it, I trust God to redeem this situation. And that's what leaders do. G. Campbell Morgan, this quote that I put down, what we do in the crisis always depends on whether we see the difficulties in the light of God or in the shadow of the difficulties. I am reminded of a story that I read in a book that Leith Anderson wrote, and the title of the book, Leadership That Works. But he relayed the story of back in 1994 in Normandy, there was a 50th anniversary of the landing on the beach on D-Day. And back in 1994, there were a few more WW2 veterans that were living than now, but different men and people who had participated in the landing were interviewed as a part of the festivities or the remembrance, I guess is a better word. And one of the men that they interviewed was a Marine, had been a Marine that day that landed on the beach, and he saw the carnage. He saw people being killed. He saw people being blown up. And he said to himself in that moment, we're going to lose. We are going to lose. Then the next guy that they interviewed was with the Army Air Corps. And this guy, he had a higher view of what was happening. He said, I saw the carnage on the beach, but I also saw the paratroopers dropping in and advancing. I saw the result of the bombardments. And he said, I looked at everything that was going on, and I said to myself, we're going to win. We're going to win. And we can't always help our perspective. But as a leader, I've got to climb up to that 30,000-foot perspective or the 5,000-foot perspective, and I've got to see the whole thing. And that's what I've got to anchor in, and that's what I must declare. And folks, I tell you, no matter the underpinnings of this present season that we're living in, no matter the underpinnings of it, I know God. And from the perspective of knowing God, I know that it is well with my soul, and it's going to be well with my soul. And that is the confidence and the optimism that we need to instill in the people that we lead.
Okay. Wow. Number 5.
All right. Number 5, continue to give priority to your physical and family health.
This is going to be a short one, but it's so true.
Yeah. If the leaders don't stay strong, then they can't return tomorrow to resume the battle. So in the midst of all of the things that we do during a crisis, and often we do have to expend far more physical energy. I was coaching a pastor this morning, and he listens to the podcast, so I'm cognizant of the fact that he will hear this podcast. But we were talking about how 2 weeks ago we were thinking, wow, I really should use all of this extra time that I have to do something. And, now we're sitting here today that wow, we are becoming more and more busy as we are facing the crisis. And I know that's happening in the lives of every leader out there. We're not sitting at home.
Yeah.
And
we are home, but
we're not sitting at home doing nothing.
Yeah.
Watching Netflix or whatever. We're engaging. You and I are engaging stuff that relates to Africa and the mission and reaching out to folks. And I know that every leader is just working as hard as they can, but continue to give priority to your physical and family health. And sometimes that's harder to do when you're home all day than it is when you go out and come back.
Yeah.
So beware of that, because that is something that we've got to pay attention to in crisis leadership.
All right. Okay. Number 6.
Okay, we got 3 more here.
We do.
So I've gotten a little long-winded on a couple of them.
That's
See,
right.
folks, when I used to edit the podcast, I would just go in and cut out, 7-8 minutes somewhere.
Yeah.
But
Not
this
this
is
time.
live to drive. Yeah. Number 6.
It's the celebrate, David.
Yeah, find something to celebrate.
Yeah.
Find something to celebrate. So remember Sir Ernest Shackleton?
I
who,
do. Yeah.
He's leading this.
He's the guy who threw the watch away.
Threw his watch away. You know what's cool about this story is he rescued a banjo that belonged to one of the crewmen. He rescued a banjo so they could have music.
I think that's pretty cool.
Now just think about that. The guy threw his gold pocket watch away, but he salvages a banjo.
Yeah.
Out of the ship. I've said that 3 times, haven't I? I'm amazed by that. You see, celebration is not a luxury. It is a necessity. Celebrate what God is doing. Celebrate lives that are being transformed. And I've seen people doing that in their live Facebook feed. I saw one comment that in a live Facebook feed, someone accepted Jesus Christ as their Lord and Savior that had watched the video. And that's incredible.
Yeah, that's something to celebrate.
Yeah, it is. And so they were celebrating that. So we celebrate small wins to relieve the pressure, to lighten the mood, to kind of lift morale.
Yeah.
I can't say that I'm a huge banjo fan.
You do like the ukulele, though,
Yeah,
if you didn't know that.
but sometimes we just got to get out the banjo and celebrate and lift our spirits.
Yeah.
So
Okay.
keep that in mind.
All right. Number 7.
Okay, I'll make these quick. Number 7, be decisive and take risks. We've got to avoid extreme confidence, and we've got to avoid extreme caution, because either of those are going to lead us to become improperly biased.
Okay.
I tend to be overly cautious. I don't even want to say that. I would rather just say, man, I'm the risk taker guy. I'm the guy that's always out there on the edge. I'm the guy that's always saying, okay, let's think about this a second.
You do take risks. It just takes you a while to take it, you know?
Yeah. And the thing here in a crisis is avoid extreme confidence and avoid extreme caution.
Okay.
Because either of them can mess us up. Both the cautious and the confident are not as open to the exploration of necessary options. Okay, so you could call it a contingency plan. That as the leader, you're thinking, okay, we're going to just keep rolling on the way we have and nothing's going to change. But the realist and the leader in you exercises a little bit of caution that says, okay, if this goes on longer than we think, or if it doesn't turn out exactly the way that I think that it will, how do I need to prepare things for some contingency? See, if you spend all your time preparing for contingencies, you're never going to move anything forward, and it's going to be drudgery. On the same hand, if you spend all of your time, just what was the opposite of what I just said? If
You don't want to, be working on a contingency plan, but you do need to plan.
You get the point.
I do.
I mean, we can't go too far in either direction.
Yeah.
But we do need to be decisive. We need to be willing to take risks because sometimes that's what sees you through the storm.
Yeah.
Is taking a risk.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. The last one, David.
The last is never give up.
Yeah.
Never give up. There's a qualifier. We know there's a time to let go. We know there's a time to quit. There's a time to walk away. We understand that. We know that. But the heart of the servant leader leading through crisis adopts an indomitable spirit. If you don't believe we're going to make it, then we're probably not going to make it. So in the hardest times of my life, there's a song that always comes to me, and I always sing it when I'm going through times when I'm not so sure how they're going to turn out, and I need to be reminded of the faithfulness of the Lord. The words of that song is, I know the Lord will make a way for me. I know the Lord will make a way for me. If I live a holy life, shun the wrong, and do the right, I know the Lord will make a way for me because he always has and he always will.
Amen.
Yeah.
Well, thank you for listening to the Calibrate Life Podcast, pressing beyond the tough stuff and experiencing the joy of living, leading, and loving. You will find a set of episode notes for this episode on our website at calibrate360.com/148.
That's right. And folks, thanks for joining us. If you're interested in the Africa mission, you can go to calibratemission.com, check it out. And hey, I've got like the 7-page PDF of crisis leadership that if you'd like a copy of that, it'll be in the weekly resource update.
Yep.
And that weekly resource update can be found at calibrate360.com. Just hit the subscribe button and we'll put that in there the next couple of weeks. Again, thanks so much for joining us today. We are praying that you be blessed and filled with the wisdom of God as you lead in the crisis that you're in. Be blessed.
All right.
All right. Hey, thanks for joining us, folks.